So moving on, we are going to be exploring the Web3 data gold rush. I like DIDs and decentralized identity, but I absolutely love data. So I'm very much looking forward to this. We've got an absolutely amazing lineup. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Ben from API 3, as well as Lewis from Gelato, aka the ice cream man. As well as Anna from ANKR and Simon from the Graph. It's great that you guys all managed to be here on time and not too hungover. So congratulations, we made it.
GM. It's a good start to the day.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. So to jump right into it, please could you introduce yourself very, very briefly and what type of data you care about?
Shall I start?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Simon. I'm a developer relations engineer for ETHDam. That's one of the core devs working on the Graph protocol. And I care about open data. I think data should become more of a public good and everybody should be able to access it and not having these silos that capitalize on it.
Cool. Hey, I'm Anna. I'm from ANKR. We kind of, I would say we Amazon Web Service for Web3. We proceed at least 25% of the whole market, and we care about the whole data, and we believe that all developers should have an access to good quality of API requests, to node infrastructure, and so on.
Hey, I'm Louis. I'm from Gelato Network. And specifically, I would say we care about validated, aggregated, and verifiable data that a set of validators commits to and has accountability for this data so that it can be consumed safely by any application out there without worrying about this data being corrupted or unsafe for their business logic.
Hey, I'm Ben. I'm from API 3. I kind of lead an ecosystem function. I think, touching on the points of what, kind of carrying on from the fellow participants, I mean, including the API providers in the Web3 ecosystem is crucial. These are the people that are processing the data, sourcing the data, and ensuring that they can, look to monetize that API into what is the Web3 economy as such. I think that's an important kind of shift in the way that people consume in Web3.
Cool, thanks a lot. Please feel free to disagree with each other on these topics. We've had some of that today, and it was more than yesterday, and I like it. So the first big question that I have is kind of from your perspective, what is like the state of data within Web3 today? It's very open, so you can go in many different directions with this.
Web3 is a big domain anyways. But like on blockchain data, what I love about blockchain data is per se, the design is open. So like everybody can run Ethereum archive node and start to see that data, but also like it grew a lot. And so this data is very big, so it's not easy to just do it at home. And I would say, like now we see that a lot of different companies also go in there and provide that data and create these data sets for the developers, which I think is good. Like everybody sees it's important and it's here, but it's also starting to be more fragmented. The APIs are incompatible with each other. Every company tries to build some moat in having developers build on top of their kind of proprietary APIs. And I think we should kind of work towards together like a public and compatible APIs and tools that everybody can use and that are interoperable.
Interoperable.
Thank you.
Good for Sunday.
I would also say that one very interesting data trend that is maybe not so obvious is that L1s are somewhat pivoting to become data availability solutions. So if you look at Ethereum, it's actually like you have this single chain, but if you look into the L2 contracts on Ethereum, if you take like a a periscope or whatever these things are called, you can actually see that there's so many infinite L2s on Ethereum, like technically embedded in call data, I guess, with dank sharding these data blobs or whatever. So the Ethereum network itself is becoming a major data layer, data provider for new blockchains that are built on top of it. And that, yeah, it's like a huge data market essentially for blockchains suddenly.
Yeah, I think if you take a step back, I mean, there's a great talk by Andreas and Topopoulos, just to make sure I got that correctly, about infrastructure inversion, right? In terms of oracles, we're 5 years into Oracle development in what is, a 15-year wider development of the space. And you've had the first iteration of Oracle infrastructure. I think you're seeing at the entrance to the market. It's taken a couple of years for people to realize their kind of first go-to-market product. And yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more, not just amongst oracles, but within people like Gelato, the Graph, RPCs, for example. This infrastructure is still being built. And yeah, I think the next couple of years, you're going to see the kind of the fruits of that labor as such in regards to what people can do when they're developing smart contract applications.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that now, kind of from another point of view, we have 90% listeners for all chains because we proceed 8 billion requests every 24 hours. And we can say that 90% of requests is just to read, not to write. So actually, technically it's 95, but okay, if you are a builder, you still need to read and then write. So only 5% is request to write something into any blockchain. For some blockchains it's more, for some it's less, but like 90% is just listeners. We have more listeners, we have more, stalking for the builders, stalking for the real data, and everybody try to find, some secrets, try to find the trends, and we have less people who really developed something. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It's typical for Web2, I would say, but for Web3, initially it was, we have a lot of developers. It calls like, oh, okay, it's only geeks here, only developers, but now we have a lot of data analysts. And I agree that it's very interesting how the L1 and L2 chains compete to each other sometimes in terms of data, and how a layer 1 Ethereum become the start for everyone who wants to understand what happened for the industry. And Duna created an amazing product, then everybody can follow the insights based on the real data. But I agree that still a lot of problems because the blockchain is not the consistent database, yeah, and we have a lot of issues with the data. So it's kind of interesting what happened inside market.
And the topic of, obviously we just heard Justin talk about L2s and kind of that narrative within the ecosystem. We've also just mentioned L2s now. Like, there's liquidity fragmentation with L2s, attention fragmentation, as well as the information fragmentation. So I'm interested to hear kind of what your thoughts are on that, and yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So with the graph, I mean, you can have subgraphs on every chain, or like every L2 that's EVM compatible. So that again kind of gives the possibility to have this abstracted layer on top of the blockchain. So like when you query the graph, it's just GraphQL, and then you don't like it's not so important which chain actually was behind. But I agree. Like then the problem is that all these steps deploy on all the chains. And then they have and then they need to combine the data again in the front end, and then it's a little bit questionable. So like, where is the liquidity actually, or was that price on Ethereum mainnet, or do I see a price on Polygon? And then that also confuses the user then. But that's just the nature of the thing, huh?
Yeah, I agree. And now we have a lot of EVM compatible chains, and they all kind of compete to each other. Yeah, so, and at the same time, surprisingly, they compete with Ethereum. So we have like the very strange situation because I believe that layer 1 Ethereum is not for humans. So we see even before it was more than 100 per transaction, now it's less, but still it's too expensive for daily transaction, yeah, for normal builders. So I would say that L1 is for be like the more technical, it's the basic infrastructure. If I would say we have a lot of data models and a lot of engineering stuff, yeah, how we can explain that, but still layer 1 is just the basics. And layer 2s now it's something where the people try to find the solution. And I agree that it's like a decentralized computer. Like, so we have decentralized computing and every single chain is find their product market fit and use case. So I believe that it will be the same development in the same direction. So it will be layer 2s and layer 1, and they will compete to each other and compete to, and we will have more the use cases transition between L1 and L2.
Yeah, I agree with that perspective, and I actually start to think of layer 1 more as securing the most important thing, which usually are the crypto assets, for example. And I'm actually quite optimistic about the L2 approach, no pun intended, but I think optimism has a really cool idea and vision that I would like to subscribe to and hope it will come to fruition. And there, I think the idea that all our assets are secured on a layer 1, and then they can be safely, trustlessly bridged, which is, I guess, the main advantage of an L2 is that you don't need a multi-sig bridge. You can have a trustless cryptographic bridge. So if you have that world, then I could see that applications become more centralized. Like you said, the computer is on L2 more centralized again, but the assets aren't. And I think that's really powerful. Maybe not everything has to be decentralized to reach these massively scalable applications. That might not be possible even, right? So I'm more happy nowadays. I definitely also was, in the Ethereum early camp and so on, but I changed my opinion a bit. But I'm a bit more happy now, especially with the optimistic roadmap, the super chain, this idea that liquidity fragmentation, first of all, might not even really happen so badly, because if you have super powerful perpetual exchanges and so on built on L2 or L3, maybe they attract way more liquidity than they do today from CeFi, because suddenly they're much faster, low latency and so on, way more capital gets injected. So maybe fragmentation will be much better than it is today on an L2 DEX, for example. And secondly, I think that with the optimistic roadmap, you have some idea of the superchain, shared sequencing, so maybe cross L2 composability or atomicity becomes technically feasible, and maybe this fragmentation, technologically speaking, isn't even so bad and can be abstracted in the future. So I'm quite, it's in the future, but it's nice to be excited about the future, right? So that's what I like.
Yeah, just to build on the point, layer 2s have the chance to probably deliver better experiences for people, maybe for perpetual DEXs, for example. And, from the viewpoint of an Oracle, if you're needing to have a very high-frequency trading experience, if you're competing with Binance, let's say, you need to have the data availability on layer 2. And the cost of delivering that on layer 1 at the moment is just going to be unfeasible. You're going to have so many overheads, some gas fees, etc. And what layer 2 does is probably gives people the opportunity to have those use cases or experiences that they want to have. And with the way that the layer 2 scale, it just means it's more feasible for the infrastructure to provide it. So yeah.
Nice. Cool, thanks. So a little bit of like a quick fire, but before that I'd like to remind if anyone wants to ask questions, please do so on the Slido. Also, one of the main organizers of the event is at home at the moment, so I wanted to wave and say hello to Pascal, if we can wave to Pascal. We hope your leg gets better soon. So as a quick fire, what is the biggest challenge that you see with data? And also then, what is the biggest opportunity that you see with data?
To sell the data. Sorry to say that.
Is that both the challenge and the opportunity?
Both, Yeah. Now when we have like kind of boom of AI, we have like a lot of, any kind of big data, you need the data set to to educate your model. And at the same time, people want to, close the data. Surprisingly, even for blockchains, people want to close the data and say, okay, now it's my private data, even in blockchain. So the biggest opportunity so far, I believe that it's to sell data, and at the same time, as a second part, is to keep privacy of the people. So I know that if you trust someone to proceed your data, to send the API request, so it's important to make sure that there are no listeners who go deeply into the body of your requests. So, and on the one hand, you want to, have a reliable infrastructure, low latency, and global coverage. Or, and another point, you need to make sure that you can protect your data. Yeah, so, and I believe that people will be more and more care about the big data sets, especially for their client or for their dApps, and say, okay, guys, please, I know that we have a blockchain and open data, and at the same time, we want to make sure that nobody use it in bad way, I would say.
Yeah, interesting point. You touched on it before. Data is not data. What we see is also like what data can we trust. So sometimes when blockchain data is extracted, especially with JSON RPC, we saw like that sometimes data is missing, and kind of knowing that that data that I'm presented is actually the truth. Although with blockchain we can verify, basically, but verification is a manual step, or like at least we can automate it, but it's not so easy. So I think that's currently a big challenge, and a lot of data providers, like we know, are not, the data is not super exact. Like it sometimes can have deviations if someone really dives into it. And I think that's something that we also can collectively work on. One research there is verifiable queries, so that we know with proofs that the query that I sent, it's true. But I mean, it's a hard topic, and I'm not into the CK research deep into it. But by myself, I'm probably not too smart enough. That's the problem. But it's a cool thing to think about. Like, yeah, but when I see data, like what is true, what is truth, and can I know and can I trust the data provider?
Oh yeah, junk in, junk out.
I think the biggest challenges with data are definitely right now privacy is the biggest challenge, I think, because in blockchains, part of the design is that it's super public, and everybody knows this here. Like technically, pretty much anyone can, if they spend 1 hour, track your NFTs and so on, find out who you are, and then basically know what you're doing, and that's not good. Privacy is normal, and we want it. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And the other big challenge is the low latency quality of on-chain data. Blockchains are too slow still, and so on. I think Solana is the biggest. Basically, that's their idea, right? Low latency blocks and so on. So they're the biggest mover there, and Ethereum has to follow suit. In terms of opportunity, though, I think the biggest opportunity is MEV for sure, because financialization is a big topic still, and MEV is massive. And I would say another big opportunity is basically using these data availability layers, Ethereum or Celestia and so on, to build whole new ecosystems around data that you anchor and commit to on chain. You can build
Sorry, that you anchor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For Solana, yeah, it's kind of, and another point is that engineering of the data operation for the node operation, it's not easy anymore. So it's the big challenge from engineering point of view, how you will proceed the archive data and how you can make sure that you can grab all the data from the blockchain. It's another big issue, especially for big blockchains like Ethereum. Solana is another point, another big chain, and you need a lot of good bare metal to operate with Solana. Yeah, so I'm kind of agree. And it's boring. We all agree to each other. Sorry.
Yeah, we need to spice this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the challenge, I'm going to say, is I think transparency in the solutions or the architectures of the way data is being served. This is from an Oracle's viewpoint as well. I think at the moment there's an opportunity for people to have more upfront honesty about the way that the Oracles are working, let's say. And at the moment there hasn't needed to be. There hasn't been a reason for anybody to kind of put that step forward. But I think when developers understand it with greater clarity and then the end users understand it with greater clarity, we'll have an overall better data infrastructure ecosystem, whether that's specific to Oracles or not. And then opportunity-wise, yeah, Louis, I think MEV and the relationship it has with Oracles, particularly arbitrage, a lot of that is created by latency in the Oracle. And there's probably going to be things like order flow auctions at the Oracle level start to be introduced. So people can start to capture Oracle extractable value, which will provide ultimately better experiences for liquidity providers and the services, but that provides then a different source of revenue that can perhaps go elsewhere other than the block producers, let's say.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Going on to the audience questions, which are surprisingly good, so thanks a lot, everyone. I'd like you to give a short answer to this one, which is, we're at a privacy-focused event. What do you think of the seemingly catch-22 of data collection and privacy? I think it's already been touched on briefly, but yeah, if you could share your thoughts.
Catch-22?
Catch-22.
I think, yeah. I think some of the privacy solutions, they're trying to basically solve it so that you can make claims about you without leaking all of the information, right? So I guess this is the promise of having data collection work, and you as the user of the data can specify what you want to reveal about yourself and what not. And this is the power that these ZK solutions give to the users, right? So you can choose to share that you have more than 10 ETH and you have a MyLady or a Remilio, preferably. And yeah, so ZK3 is in the house. I think Sysmo, I got to know them for the first time here, is in the house. I think they're working on stuff like this. So I guess that's maybe a solution to it. Although, if you are like Cambridge Analytica, you will never be as happy with that as before, right?
Any other quick, short answers on privacy and data in the space?
Oh, I have not popular answer. So we all want to believe that we can keep our privacy. At the same time, if we want to use the modern product, if we want to be included into the modern world, we should, the privacy is a compromise. So I believe that there are a lot of brave guys who try to find this compromise, try to, touch the water, and because in the modern world we have not very easy, let me put it that way, not very easy problems to solve. Yeah, and privacy is one of them. So it's all the time the compromise, and it's really hard to find the right way. Yeah, which way is right? Definitely, we should not abuse the data that we have. Yeah, as any company, any DApp or whatever. But on the other hand, it's one of the biggest questions, I believe, is our own privacy.
Any other thoughts, otherwise we move on? All right, one question, and you mentioned zero-knowledge proofs just now. Does the explosion of zero-knowledge put a dampener on data solutions? I think maybe reframing it is does it cause limitations in terms of the amount of data that can be aggregated, and kind of how are you thinking about that?
I touched quickly before that I know that the research of verifiable queries or verifiable indexing in terms of the graph is something that's enabled with CK technologies, so that helps there for knowing is that data actually true. But on the other hand side, when it's obscure what the data is, then it's also harder to reason about. If we don't know which transactions that are actually going on chain, then we don't know how much actually was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general data will always flow and it will always be there and just grow and grow and grow. I think I wouldn't say that zero knowledge proofs mean less data. I think it's sort of like it's just a powerful technology to compress data, to perform computations over data, to prove something about data. I think it just basically it just adds to that. Actually, it's not subtractive, I would say.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of building on again. You have these Web 2 systems full of extensive amounts of data, and the typical example is medical records, for example. You don't want that information on-chain, but you can use zero-knowledge proofs to verify that off-chain data is the most accurate way, or is the right data, of course. And yeah, I think that's a very important primitive. If you apply it to things like open banking or different parts of the financial systems, you can start to do credit checks, personal checks very quickly and easily without making that data publicly available, which will, I think, inevitably become part of applications. And yeah, it seems a logical way to go.
Yeah, and you don't always need to have access to the underlying data set if you can verify kind of like a roll-up of the underlying data, where it's, you just get the graph at the end of it. Not your graph. Another question is, this is quite specific. What do you think about Urbit's approach to data, making it self-sovereign? Any quick thoughts on that? If you're
What was the question again?
What do you guys think about Urbit's approach to data? Do you know Urbit? Am I saying it right, Urbit?
Urbit, yeah.
Yeah.
Centralized cloud.
Kind of centralized and decentralized at the same time, yeah. I think that it's the same issue as we have with any programming language, because when we find out that each programming language contains some disadvantages, we think, okay, let's create one more language that's going to be universal and it's going to be one of the best. And at the end of the day, we have just +1 programming language, So it's... I love that we have a lot of solution for this data, but I believe there is no one solution. Yeah, we have a good approach, and I believe it is good to have one more, but only after, I don't know, several years we can say, is it good or bad? Is it really solve the problem or not?
Fair enough. Yeah, it's like the cloud wars. I guess the last question that I have here that I'd like to ask, and I'd like very short answers. Are there any data sets that are important that no one is currently paying attention to?
Oh, whoa.
No.
Data about central banks and their real assets.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing how the banks in the US didn't have the data on the treasury purchases of Silicon Valley Bank, for example. Like, how is that data not available? Not a bad point.
Yeah, maybe political party funding.
Yeah, any Web3 data sets?
How Web3 is really centralized.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I wish that data was accessible. Cool. Well, I think we can close it off at that. Thank you so much for attending this morning, and thank you for the great questions. If there are a few more questions in here, so if they weren't answered, please go and find these charming humans afterwards to inquire. Thanks a lot, and please give a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.